Good morning. Today is Monday, September 23rd. Today's a very special day, and I'll tell you why in just 3 seconds. Today, we have a podcast episode with a very special member of our church. He is an elder of our church. His name is Hoyoung, and it's his birthday today. So it's like double whammy because he's on the podcast, but it's also his birthday. Whammy, like that. You know what I mean?
It's his birthday when we're recording.
No, it's his birthday when we release it on the 23rd of September. So it is his birthday today. Is that like private information I shouldn't be handing out? Oh, well, I handed it out already, so it's too late. It's gone.
Your security has been leaked, so I think you're a little salty.
You leak everyone else's?
Yeah, so you leak everyone else's?
No. So I'm doing this thing right now, right? Before we begin, I'm very tired today. If you see the bags under my eyes, it's because I'm doing this thing right now where I put a cup of coffee next to my bed. So the moment I wake up, boom, I just chug it. And then my body can't help but to wake up. It worked today, first time. I tried the other day, it didn't work because I just didn't drink the coffee. But then yesterday I tried it and it worked. So I'm very tired today. Maybe my voice will be lower. You know what I mean?
If you found this interesting, could you reply to us? Just kidding.
No, it's just my method of waking up. But it is Monday morning. You are wide awake. And we are going to be talking this morning about church budget. I know there may be some questions regarding how our church makes the budget, what goes into the process, the prayers, the thoughts, the mission of our church. Does our budget reflect that mission? And all of these other great questions we're going to be discussing on the podcast this morning. However, we are recording on 2 separate days for this podcast. And so today we are recording on Friday, September the 20th. And so Pastor Eugene and I will be going through the Q&A, the current events, and the heresy or not, the meme of the week. And tomorrow, Saturday, we'll be recording with our elder Hoyoung. And so we'll have that portion at the end of our podcast for this morning. But let's get it going on this Monday morning, Elder Hoyoung's birthday, the 23rd of September. You are listening to the Dear Church podcast. Welcome to the Dear Church podcast, where we exist to fill your ears and your minds with the study of God to see the world as disciples of Christ. My name is Sam Yang, and we have with us Pastor Eugene. And
I was going to say.
I know. I felt it. I felt it. You were loading up, and I just had to just kind of.
Yeah.
We have with us Junseok and Brian, as always.
Let's say the Korean names. Let's say your Korean name. I think your dad would be proud.
Why would my dad be proud?
That's your given name. Yang Ju-young.
Yeah, that's my Korean name.
And then we have
Junseok, who's Korean.
Seo Junseok.
Yeah.
And then we have
Lee-Seok, who is Brian. He was born with that name, I heard. Legend has it. Oh, is he?
Oh, he's going to miss all this.
Oh. Thank you, Dawei. And actually, Mr. What's his face? Schnitzel? What's his name?
Schnitzel.
No. Spielberg.
That's pretty racist.
Sorry. What is that again? That's a small pretzel, right?
Schnitzel's like a fried thing.
Yeah, a little pretzel. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Strudel.
Strudel.
It's like a pie.
So today we've flipped some things around, and we're going to be starting with current events. Again, we have the portion with our elder Hoyoung following this first portion here that we have. So we've just kind of flipped some things around. And today for our current events, we are going to talk about the assassination attempt on Donald Trump, the second one. It's kind of crazy that I have to specify there's lightning. Sorry. There's lightning.
This is too big.
Are you scared in all honesty, are you scared of lightning? No. So you're not scared of lightning. you're a foolish man. If that thing struck you, you would die. You shouldn't be scared of lightning. That's crazy. Anyway, so it's crazy that I even have to say the second attempt on the presidential candidate, Donald Trump. We should never even have had a first. But here we are talking about the second. There was a man suspected in the incident that was camped outside the Trump International Golf Club in West Palm Beach, Florida, with food and a rifle for nearly 12 hours. I think they said something like 1 a.m. to like 1 p.m. or something like that. This individual was highly concerned with the war in Ukraine. He had a website where he tried to raise money and recruit volunteers to go to Kiev to join the fight. What had happened was the gunman's rifle was spotted on the course perimeter 400 to 500 yards away from Donald Trump, and Secret Service fired 4 to 6 rounds, and the suspect fled before he was even able to fire off one round. This is the second attempt on Donald Trump's life.
That we know of.
That we know of, right? Because there's other ones that I heard of, I think even in Long Island, something like that, where a K-9 unit picked up something. I don't know. This is just what we know of. That's made the news.
Yeah, in Long Island, it was a lot of fishy stuff going on. Like people had to be admitted to the hospital for a bunch of stuff. Yeah, like their eyes were
something in the water,
burning. Huh? A bunch of people, like 20 to 30 people felt something. Yeah.
What?
Kind of crazy.
Wow. That's crazy. But I guess not to dismiss that, but back to Donald Trump.
No, it was at his rally.
Oh, it was?
Yeah.
What were they doing over there?
I don't know. Well, someone's messing around.
That's rough. So, I mean, you know, with this happening, we have never seen this happen in my life. If you're in your 30s, you've never really seen this happen. We should never see this happen anywhere. And, you know, we talked about this a long time ago, but, you know, places like Mexico and other places around the world, these are very, very common things. Assassination attempts and successful assassinations against a presidential candidate or even a president or leaders can be common, sadly. But we never thought this would happen here at home in the U.S., and yet here it is happening. What does this mean to us as a country, as the United States of America, USA number one? And what does it mean to us as Christians? Like, how do we think through this? How do we pray? What is going on? This is crazy.
Yeah, man. If you have your, let's say, some presidential candidate, political, you know, person get assassinated, you're in a very, very messy time.
In a crazy place.
That's where we are. You know what's also interesting? Like you said, in your lifetime it didn't happen. In my lifetime it did, because Ronald Reagan was shot.
He was shot?
Yeah, he was shot.
Wait, is that how he died?
He didn't die because he was shot. No.
Sorry, yeah.
Anyway, he was shot. And what was interesting, though, was after he was shot, Ronald Reagan's poll numbers jumped. It jumped to like 12 points or something like that, if I remember correctly. After Donald Trump was shot, or, he was shot, his ear was shot and then he was bleeding. His poll numbers did not change. After the second assassination attempt, his poll numbers did not change.
Trump?
Yeah, it's really interesting, because usually when you try to kill your political opponent, people who were kind of like, I don't really like them, that kind of thing, people usually would change their mind, be like, well, why are they trying to kill him?
It's crazy.
Why are they trying to kill him?
It's
and
crazy.
Then you would kind of change your mind about that political.
Yeah.
So you can't kill somebody.
No.
That's like a thing.
No.
That we should remember.
You definitely shouldn't kill somebody.
But then all these people are now coming out. Like you see these interviews on TikTok and they're on X where people ask people like, Donald Trump was almost shot. What do you think? And then you have these slew of responses like, why did he miss? Or to the effect of, if it was me, I wouldn't have missed.
People are
to
crazy.
The other side where it'd be like, well, he was asking for it, that kind of thing. So there are these like really insane responses where now when I say this is a mess, it really is a mess for us morally. And this goes back to the whole thing where people still think to this day, even though we had this conversation, in our podcast, not that people all listen to the podcast and so they should have changed their mind, but people to this day still think that if it was up to them and they had the choice of killing Hitler, they would kill Hitler. Because Hitler was the cause of all this destruction and evil in World War II, even World War I.
Right.
It was because of Hitler all these Jews died. And while Hitler is primarily responsible, you don't know that it was only Hitler. What about Himmler? What about Goebbels? What about Joseph Goebbels or Goebbels? What about him? What about all these people who stood by his side that believed in the exact same thing that he did, that also hated the Jews? You think that you just killing Hitler would have solved every single issue, that World War II wouldn't have happened? That's how simplistic our minds have become, thinking that if I could go back in time and kill Hitler, everything would be okay. You have no idea. And this is why all these like time travel movies are popular, because everybody's so reduced into this simplistic thinking. Like, even what was that huge one where in Marvel where Avengers went and they got like the time stones or the Infinity Stones, and they got it together from these other timelines, and they were able to get the glove back together and all these other timelines. It's such a mess of even trying to keep that storyline cohesive and logical, reasonable. You can't. Because you could only reduce it to, well, Earth 616 is the only Earth that matters, or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so this kind of thinking doesn't even make sense if you try to extrapolate it into a story, but people don't. People don't want to. So they just want to think Hitler, bad, kill, okay, good. I've done the world a favor. And so now that we think like this, which was relatively easy to do, you just have to say Trump, bad, Trump, just like Hitler. Hitler must be killed, so kill him. And if you miss, it's like, why'd you miss? Why'd you miss killing Hitler? And people just don't care. So even people that they think they're reasonable, like maybe even people listening to this podcast, oh yeah, I'm a reasonable guy. And it's like, someone tried to kill Hitler, it's like, oh well, that's not good. I don't agree, but that's not good. Instead of thinking, this is crazy. This is the craziest thing that you could do, is try to kill your political opponent and not have it like raised or elevated to where it should be. It should be on the news 24/7. It should be continually being taught, like, oh, maybe we shouldn't call our political opponents Hitler or a fascist dictator like Mussolini. Maybe we shouldn't say stuff like that, because that kind of rhetoric will drive up political violence. And so, to be honest, this is a terrible place that our country is in. And the fact that we don't talk about it, that we don't care, that we're normalizing it, it just goes to show what kind of state we're in. We're in a state of mess, chaos. People just hate Hitler, and they hate Trump. Like they hate Hitler. And if you go back and you'd be like, what did Trump do that was so bad in his 4 years of, being president and during his tenure that you think he's Hitler? Did he round up 6 million? Oh, he would have rounded up, but he didn't. Oh, he's going to, but he didn't.
Right.
This kind of reasoning is not only illogical, it doesn't pass even the smell test. It doesn't go to step 2. You can't even go to step 2 with this kind of logic. But what you would do, though, is you go the other way. You go, well, we got to kill him. We got to make sure he's eliminated. We got to make sure that, we just continue to spew this rhetoric that is, completely inflammatory, that people catch on. And you just become unhinged emotionally. And you can't talk about politics in a reasonable, logical manner. It's about life or death if we vote Hitler in. And then what happens is, this is what I really believe, you become bamboozled, because a situation will come up when it's life and death, but you'll only be thinking about Trump or something to that effect. And when the actual situation of life and death comes up, we'll just hit our emotional fatigue on the matter and be like, I don't want to even think about it. Don't even talk to me about this politician because I'm just tired. And you just won't have the capacity to even measure or weigh in a reasonable, logical manner all these other political candidates.
Thank you for that, Pastor Eugene. I hope as we continue to see what happens in our country and as we continue to pray for our country that, again, like uniformly, is that right? Altogether? That we would altogether condemn murder. Assassination is a murder. And it's kind of tough that people are like kind of on the fence about this kind of stuff.
It's a sad place that we're in.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's destruction from within. When you want to assassinate your political opponent, or you believe it's an absolute necessity, or you've convinced people. Like this guy, what's his name? Ralph or something like that?
Nader?
No, the guy who tried to do the second.
I didn't want to name him because you know how Daily Wire does that thing?
No, he didn't actually do it.
I mean, I guess.
Yeah, so he was successful. Before they scrubbed all his social media accounts, what I found most interesting was that, I mean, we all have receipts for this, but this guy's Twitter or X account has a first follow. You know when you first follow somebody or they follow you back?
Yeah.
The first person to follow him was an ex-CIA member. It's in their profile, ex-CIA.
It's weird.
Weird, man. I mean, the connections that this person would have had, it's just weird. So people just go down the rabbit hole. The point is, you just can't trust anybody if you continue to do this. If stuff like this continues to happen, people's trust in the institutions will continue to deteriorate because we don't know what's true, what's out there. Now we know that when they had the security briefing, the intel briefing about the first assassination attempt, even the Democrat senator would come out saying, "This is crazy. Like what the American people, when they find out about this, it's gonna change a lot. It's gonna blow their minds." And then now, when they're trying to bring it out to the public, we're seeing the DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, basically stonewalling them. This is what they said, and this is not partisan. This is the Democrat senator saying they're stonewalling us. They won't give us the information to give the American public. And so this is where the trust in institutions start to fall. And when you can't trust the government, you have unrest on every level, in every dimension. You can't have a functioning society when you don't trust a government, which is one of the basics of society. So that's unfortunate.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully nothing like this will happen again, and we can continue to pray for peace in our country as well. Actually, we have two current events today. The second one, and these are pretty big events. We got him. Diddy, we got him.
Is that really something that you wanted to talk about?
No, the reason why I want to talk about this, but this is huge right now because P. Diddy has been like on the news cycle all over the place. People have been finding things out left and right, and then we finally got him. Sean Diddy Combs was arrested on Monday, September the 16th at the Park Hyatt Hotel, never been, in New York City. This is a statement released by his attorney. And the reason why I want to bring this up is because it's so interesting. This was a statement released by his attorney. Sean Diddy Combs is a music icon, self-made entrepreneur, loving family man, and proven philanthropist who has spent the last 30 years building an empire, adoring his children, and working to uplift the black community. He is an imperfect person, but he is not a criminal. These are the acts of an innocent man with nothing to hide, and he looks forward to clearing his name in court. P. Diddy has since been charged with sex trafficking by force, transportation to engage in prostitution, racketeering conspiracy, and the allegation is that he ran an enterprise that engaged in sex trafficking, forced labor, or kidnapping, arson, and other crimes. He's also accused of verbal, emotional, physical, and sexual abuse. There are more detailed allegations and charges that I won't get into, like the 1,000 bottles of lube and baby oil that were found in his home. home raid for his freak off sex parties. But safe to say, he'll be in prison for a very, very, very long time. Now, there are so many crimes that are.
He should be. It's safe to say he should be.
We
We don't know if he will be.
I'll lock him up.
Where would you lock him up?
No, like on
Sam?
defense. Lock down. You know what I mean? I will score on Chunseok with one leg, going right every time. Okay, 2 legs, going right every time. In basketball. People actually think he's good. I don't understand. No, it's really, it bothers me.
I think he's good. He did score on you a few times. Did he or did he not score
No,
on
but
you?
anyone can throw up a ball and it might go in, though. You know?
So he did score on you a few times.
You taught me no lessons.
Yeah.
Chunseok. But all these crimes are sex related. And the question is why is that though? Like, is it because sex has now become a method of expression, with LGBTQ plus making it okay? Why is it always sex? All these crimes that are happening, it's why is it though? Like, is it because our minds are so depraved? Like why is it? Is it because sex is something supposed to be good and holy and the depraved mind just wants to desecrate it? Why is it?
Yeah, I would say it's all of them. It's all about rebellion against God, always. C.S. Lewis did a little bit, which would have made more sense, I guess, when he wrote it, when he was alive. It was, 60 years ago. But now, I don't know, maybe people, it's so sad. Okay, so he gives us a little illustration. He goes, if you went and you saw a theater packed and everybody's waiting, for the show to come on. In the show, it's like there's something concealed and they slowly reveal little by little. And everybody's, really like getting enticed. They're lusting after, right? And they're slowly revealing, and it's like a piece of food.
Yeah.
C.S. Lewis goes, you can honestly say that this society has an unhealthy relationship with food. But he was talking about, at the time, like strip clubs and things like that. Like people showing off their body or sex. And like, we do that with sex. And then you could tell that it is an unhealthy society if you do that, that kind of like tease or something to that effect to increase the lust in people. If you did that with food. And I'm just thinking, I'm reading this stuff. I'm like, dude, we do that with food now. That's crazy.
Yep.
So everything starts to deteriorate. And this is where I think when Paul lists his, we could read it. We read the whole list from 1 Corinthians 6:9.
1 Corinthians 6:9 reads, or do you not know that the unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom of God? Do not be deceived, neither the sexually immoral, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor men who practice homosexuality.
10.
Nor thieves, nor the greedy, nor drunkards, nor revilers, nor swindlers will inherit the kingdom of God.
Yeah, it's not the only place, obviously.
Yeah.
But then throughout the scriptures and throughout Paul's epistles, he gives lists. Obviously, it's not a comprehensive list, but I think there's a reason why he always starts off with porneia first.
Yeah,
Sexual
yeah.
immorality. I think it's the one that opens the door to all these other things easily. Of course, you could have like reviling before and not sexual immorality, but sexual immorality inevitably will lead to reviling. Inevitably leads to all these other sins, which is what we're seeing in society.
Yeah.
Because of sexual immorality that was rampant in the 60s, now everything is tainted. It's not just sex that's tainted. Our food is tainted. Our music industry is tainted. Even the way we do business is tainted. The way we interact with people. He held this and he would, Sean Combs would blackmail people with the videos that he would record in his house, allegedly. But, now all that stuff is coming out. And so everything becomes tainted because all of society is now dark and tainted. It's stained. It's ruined. You can't have a semblance of order because of this kind of debauchery, this kind of immorality. And so, yeah, Sean Diddy Combs is, look, his story, people aren't surprised by, but people aren't flabbergasted as they should be, just like the whole second assassination attempt. It's indicative of where our social norms have gone down to.
Yeah.
What should be like putting us aghast with disgust doesn't do that anymore. We're just like, yeah, it's that, that kind of thing. It's society, the society's evil.
Yeah.
And stuff like this doesn't, look, it's going to get worse. And yeah, I think I was telling my wife last night, I just don't think that people understand how bad it's going to get. It's going to get worse, and it's going to get really bad. And I'm not trying to fearmonger my wife or anything like that. I'm not trying to fearmonger here. I'm telling you, our capacity to accept what the Lord hates, what he derides, what he finds in disgust, we feel like it's normal. Even Christians the point. Like when you see someone that is scantily dressed, for example, that doesn't disgust you anymore. You just go, hey, the people just dress like that. That's the way it is.
Don't go to no gyms because it's terrible.
I mean, that's the thing. Like when you go to a gym, you see stuff like that. I guess it's normal. This is normal to, for dudes to not even wear a shirt sometimes. It's like, what? That's not normal,
yeah,
dude.
It's tough.
Like, put on a shirt.
Yeah.
And it's normal for women to have like a sports bra or something.
Yeah.
That's it. Mm-hmm. It's not normal.
No.
These are not normal things that we should be exposed to on a daily basis, and yet it is. And so Christians have to live in this society, but then we are also finding these things to be normalized in our lives. And so the second assassination attempt is what it is, We're not disgusted. We're not appalled. We're not grieving for the state of our nation and our politics. We're not doing that. We're just like, it is what it is. We hear about Sean Combs are like, yeah, he's just the bad guy. No, the things that he's been accused of is things of top tier demonic stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't think it should be normalized. I think we should be rightly disgusted. And you see these people in the Bible. Of course, people fell, but people were disgusted by sin. And that's what we should be as well. Like, look at David. When that messenger came, he wanted to be like, yeah, I'm the one that, got rid of Saul. He's like, you dare lay a finger on God's anointed? And he's like, strike him down right now.
Yeah.
And then people would have been confused because they have no sense of righteousness that David had. And by no means was he perfect, but man, he was miles ahead of where we are now, miles ahead of where we are now, where we wouldn't have even, where we would not have thought like David did about the touching of the Lord's anointed, about thinking like you can't touch someone that God picked. Like even though he would do evil things, like you don't touch him. That's someone that God will decide to do. And that's a king that God specifically anointed. And we don't even think like that now when we talk about each other. Like when I'm talking about the anointed, I'm talking about even like people like our brothers and sisters in Christ in church. We don't even take a step back. We just immediately start spewing rumors and gossip and talking bad about people like it's nothing. Like it's nothing. And that is an evil. That's an evil that has invaded your heart, mind, and soul, and you just have to repent. And so if you don't find this stuff disgusting, if you're not appalled by the stuff that's going on, I think maybe it's a heart check that we need. Maybe it's a heart check that we need. Maybe we are not only did we normalize this stuff, maybe we're in it. We're in the thick of this, and we're a part of this evil that's going on. We're not standing against it. We're not calling it out for what it is. but we're participating in it. And that's a crying shame, to be honest.
But how do we stand against stuff like that? So, I mean, we brought up the example of the gym, right? Like, we can look away, but is that really standing away? Like, standing apart from it? Like, do we tell them, hey, put a shirt on? Like, what? How do we fight against it as Christians when people that are, worldly or people that are secular are doing these things and we are just walking by or something? Like, how do we stand against it, when we're not the ones doing that?
Yeah, I would, I think what people have been saying is good. The advice that I hear, first you have to guard your heart. That's your primary duty. You have to guard your heart, especially against, the things that the Lord detests, that he finds in abhorrence to, And so those are the things that you would try to guard your heart the best at. You set up guardrails. People have come to me, other pastors, not only in this church, but even outside of church, saying, can you keep me accountable? Can you hold my feet to the flame? Make sure I'm right, that kind of thing. Make sure I'm doing good, because these things are absolutely important in life. And so I think guarding your heart is the number one thing. And number two, I think people have this ingenuity that we don't tap into. People can create their own gyms. Your church can create your own outings. I'm not saying that you need to separate yourself completely out of the world. That's not that. Even Paul says that. That's impossible. But it's also in 1 Corinthians. But what you can do is you can separate yourself from the sin as much as you can. And so obviously if you go to a gym, somebody might not be inappropriately dressed or something like that. You don't participate in that, though. That's the whole point. You don't participate it. You can avert your eyes, you could be like me and take off your glasses, something like that, and just be disgusted. It's one of those things where if you can do stuff, you start to think, well, how can I continue to flee? How can I continue to fight? How can I continue to condemn and not normalize it? Like, abortion is an abhorrent evil. That's what we have to say. We got to stop talking about, well, what about these exception cases? That's when you fell into the trap. You've fallen into the trap, And to just a little bit of a tangent, I know we were talking about Diddy and then the assassination, but now I want to bring up this thing where now even the Democratic presidential candidate, Kamala Harris, is saying this woman in Georgia or something died because of a Trump ban on abortion.
I saw that.
There are so many lies in that statement, so much gaslighting. First of all, there's no Trump ban. I don't even know where she even gets that word. But if a state bans abortion, that's a state ban. And she apparently it wasn't good enough because she still got the abortion. She took these abortion pills, which killed the twins in her body. So she murdered 2 people in her body with these pills. And when the remains of these humans weren't expelled properly, she started to get septic and then she died. She needed to expel it. And so she could have gone to a hospital. It's like a procedure called DNC, but not the Democratic National Convention, but the DNC is a process where you could take, and that state, Georgia, would have done, because it's not illegal to do that. She doesn't know any better, so she goes to a hospital outside, I believe, and then the state, I might be getting some of the details not fully there, but I think these are all true, what I'm saying. And she was waiting for them to do the procedure. For whatever reason, she waited too long until she became septic, and then she died. And now we have this presidential candidate that's saying it's because of Trump's ban on abortion that she died. No, man. She died because she killed her 2 babies, and her 2 babies didn't exit her womb in a fashion where it was healthy because she killed them.
Yep.
And so she died as a result. This is a tragic situation. But But to then to say that it's because we didn't have abortion as an option that she died, that's the most insane gaslighting ever. And guess what? People will believe it. I bet people, even after listening to this explanation, will still believe it. Because we have gone to a place where the veil is over our eyes. We are in a place of judgment. And so you're seeing all these things in current events taking place because this is the judgment of God, where you don't know what's left and right, up and down anymore. And what do we have to be? We have to be people that are purveyors of the truth and proclaimers of the truth. Not only do we live it and give it, we have to proclaim it with your mouth. And so when people are saying like, oh, hey, Pastor Eugene, maybe you shouldn't preach on this stuff. Maybe you shouldn't be so political. It's invaded our political world precisely because we have been talking about the truth. Precisely because preachers have not been preaching the truth. Preachers, you got to preach the truth, man. You got to be like, abortion is evil. And if people come up to you like, what about these exceptions? And you have to say murder is evil. It's against the word of God, and God abhors that kind of evil. And so if we don't say stuff like that clearly from the pulpit, it's no wonder even people that are professing Christians are confused. And we end up in a state where all these Christians believe in heresies because we don't even make it clear from the pulpit what are good and true doctrines of the faith that the Bible has been telling us and the church has been believing the last 2,000 years.
So let me try to respond to that, Pastor Eugene, because again, I think this topic and conversation of politics at the pulpit has been kind of hotly debated in a sense, right? So would you say then that maybe 30 years ago, we would not have had to have talk about politics on the pulpit, but now in 2024, as a pastor, we have to?
Well, okay. I don't know if I did this here, but let's do it. This is what I've been thinking about for a very long time. Let's take two Venn diagrams. And one circle, well, let's take one Venn diagram, but one circle is politics and the other circle is sermons from the pulpit, okay?
Okay. So there's two circles.
Yeah.
Are they touching at all or like not even, are they like almost touching or are they?
They're touching, like there's some intersection.
A little bit.
Yeah, in a few years ago.
A few years, okay, a few years ago.
A few years ago, there's some intersection.
Okay.
But now, my point is, you have to, it's not that the two circles are being conjoined. Just increase the diameter of the politics circle because politics is everywhere now.
I see.
The government wants to go into everything.
I see, okay.
Government has gotten so big. It needs to help the poor. It needs to help women. It needs to help people's rights. It needs to do this. It needs to go into business. It needs to regulate this. It needs to do all that. Politics has gotten so huge.
Yeah.
It's invaded. It needs to go into school. Look at the Department of Education. The department. So I was talking again. I have conversations with my wife, and I ask her what she thinks because she's a school teacher, and she grew up in the system, and so she knows about the system. And so I told her about this. I said, tell me what you think, but I think the Department of Education is now an evil institution. It's a federal institution that needs to be abolished because what they are doing from the federal, meaning top down, is they're saying these are the things you need to teach our kids, and they don't know anything about the locality. They don't know anything on the state level. It's just the federal level that are doing this, right? What if cities and communities don't want some of the stuff that they teach? Oh, no, we need to have some kind of standard. And so that's what we have. Okay. And then what happened, though, is that in the Department of Education, the teachers' unions started to get developed. Now teachers' unions are so big, they control the Department of Education. They control they sway money in political campaigns. That's how huge these teachers' unions are. And so when teachers at their best would have looked out for the students' interests, teachers' unions, however, look out for the teachers' interests. Yep. And so in an ideal world, the teachers will want to look out for the students. So in an ideal world, when you protect the teachers, you protect the students, but not if the entity's sole purpose is to only protect the teacher's interest. Then sometimes the teacher's interest can be antithetical to the student's interests.
Yeah.
And so the teachers' unions will be going against the good of the students.
Yeah.
Is that true? Is that possible? And my wife goes, it's absolutely true. It's absolutely, and she benefits from these teachers' unions because she's part of the New York City Board of Ed, the biggest board of ed in the country, I believe. And so's your wife, right?
Yeah.
And so we benefit from that. We have great packages, meaning like, compensation packages.
Yeah.
Insurance is great.
Yeah.
And so, it's great. However, at what expense? At the expense of what? And so what happened? What happened when it came top down? You have to mask all your children. It's like, what? What if I have like 3 kids in my classroom?
Yeah.
Why do I have to mask them?
Yeah.
That's crazy. But no, top down. There's nothing that you could do that's good for the children anymore because they're not the primary source of interest. It's to protect your own. And when your job is primarily protecting your own position, teachers union, you go back to politicians. That's why you got to continue to see that politicians' interest is to protect their own behinds so that they get reelected, so that they get power, so that they can continue to have this power. Man, you have a more and more corrupt institution. So no, I hate the Department of Education. I hate it. I think they're doing an incredible disservice and harm to our children now. The Department of Education right now is doing incredible harm. Look, I get it that there's some good that they should have done. Because in 1976, when Jimmy Carter instituted the Department of Ed, it was so that all these people could grow up learning about our country. We got all these people, all these immigrants now that don't know anything about our country. They don't know about our culture, our laws. That's why you hear about all these things about cats and dogs and, cars crashing.
Yeah.
And there's all these accidents happening because they don't know the rules of the road, but they're just given cars. You can't do that. You got to teach them about your laws. And we went over this in our immigration podcast. And so these are things that should be infuriating. And, when Ronald Reagan became president, he tried to get rid of the Department of Ed, but he failed. And he said it himself, I failed. I couldn't get rid of it. And now it's grown to be this monster that no one can get rid of. Trump recently came out and said, I'm going to get rid of the Department of Ed, which is like, whoa, how are you going to do that? He couldn't even give us a plan. Because this is a monster that people don't know how huge and how disgusting it is. And so when people go, these institutions help the poor, it helps the children. It's like, no, it doesn't. It's supposed to, but it doesn't. And they'll cite stuff like, well, it helped these 12 people here. It's like, what are you talking about? And so, when you have these big government or federal institutions just sucking up taxpayer money, and actually our education is decreasing. We're falling behind with the rest of the first world nations. Like, what are we, 26 now in math or something like that? The U.S.
We're pretty terrible.
It's abysmal is what it is. We should be ashamed that we're pouring so much money and nothing happens. And what's the solution that we're seeing from the government? We got to put in more money.
Yeah.
Give me more power so I could tax more, that I can print more, that I could do more. And yet, what do we see? We see it all going down. Look, all this points back to, if we're talking about current events, it points back to, you keep on thinking that the government will save you. So you keep on giving the government more power. You deserve what you get. You deserve what you vote in. If we vote in an administration, which is currently what this platform, the Democratic platform, is running on, that says we're going to take more control of your private lives, you deserve what you vote in. That's what it is.
Yeah.
And it's not even about, I honestly don't think it's about politics anymore. It's just an excuse. It's because you love rampant evil. I just can't see it other way. Either you're an idiot or you love rampant evil. I don't understand how any Christian in their right mind can say abortion is an absolute good or a necessity. Any Christian in their right mind. And by idiot, I mean completely immature. You could be a child, but good thing children don't get to vote. Because children will say, I can't believe that you're not going to vote for our first blank president. And they'll put some kind of DI quality, woman, black, whatever it is.
Right.
It's a shame that our kids are being taught stuff like this in school. I had a parent come up to me and say, my children are like, you're not going to vote for potentially our first woman president? And, he was telling me, like, I need to somehow teach my kids something. I don't know how. And I was like, this is an incredible place we're in. It's an incredible place we're in.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I think that leaves us with something to think about. And I know we had started with, first the assassination attempt, and then we talked about P. Diddy a little bit. And we talked about just right now, again, about the abortion, I guess the botched abortion that killed the mother as well.
No, the abortion was successful.
Oh, right. But
she was successful in killing her twins.
The abortion that also killed the mother, which is a tragedy.
And it happens.
Yeah.
What these people won't tell you is that you kill your babies, you can also kill yourself.
Yeah.
What you're putting in your body is lethal. What makes you think that you're completely safe?
Yeah.
It's untrue. You could also die getting an abortion procedure performed on you.
Yeah.
And people have died. They've died on the table even.
Yeah.
And they've died a few days later because of infections, of things that, that go wrong. This happens all the time, but people don't know it because people aren't being shown the right information. And we need to speak out against stuff like this. I don't care who it is. I don't care if you're saying, well, aren't you like pro-Trump if you say this? No, I'm not. I said nothing about Trump, nothing. But your minds have been so twisted that if we say something that Kamala Harris did wrong, we're saying we're pro-Trump. I said nothing about Trump. I said what Kamala Harris said is gaslighting and evil to the nth degree. And if you can only think of it binary, then so be it. So be it. But that's not what we said. We never presented it to you as a binary. We said, this woman who's running for office said this, which is a complete lie. That's a lie. And you're like, oh, well, why don't you say the lies of Trump then? It's like, why do we need to equivocate here? He said nothing to that level in lying. He said nothing to that level of saying this woman died because she couldn't get an abortion. Trump said nothing to that level. How dare you think that if I don't equivocate two candidates that I'm not being fair? No, man. Some of the things that are being said are completely evil, complete lies. I get it. No politician is perfect. They can be idiots sometimes. Sometimes they can say stupid, irrational things. Absolutely. Did Trump do stuff like that? Absolutely. Why do I have to say that, though? Why do I have to say that I'm being nonpartisan? No, man. None of this stuff is the same. You can't say that and say, give me something bad that Trump said that's on the same level. Because he didn't. He didn't say anything to that evil, that level of evil. This is horrible. And the fact that we can't see it shows how shameful the pulpit has become. People that are supposed to be teachers have become. Pastors can't say this, but they know it's true because they don't want to be labeled as partisan. This has nothing to do with partisan politics, but it has everything to do with revealing what is evil out there in the world. And when I say abortion is the biggest evil out there right now, I mean it. I mean it. You don't kill the least of these and then call it women's healthcare, reproductive rights, whatever euphemism you want to use, and think you can get away with it, at least from our podcast.
Yeah.
You can't, you'll never be able to think that here. And I hope that all these other people will see this and eventually come to the light, brothers. What else can I say? Come to the light. Tell the people the truth. Abortion is an abhorrent evil. You can't serve babies to the god Moloch and not think that Yahweh will not respond. He will respond, and he will destroy you who give up their babies to Moloch.
Thank you for that. I think that's helpful and convicting. I wanted to end this current event time, and I know it's been a while, but with another, I guess, event or I guess announcement or news that came out this past week, and it's very sad. I think a lot of us have been impacted and convicted through the teaching and the preaching of this man. And I think it's when a spiritual giant falls, it's not without consequences. So I wanted to read this blurb for us, and this is a announcement or news from the Trinity Bible Church of Dallas, and it reads, "The elders at Trinity Bible Church of Dallas regretfully announce that effective immediately, Stephen J. Lawson has been removed indefinitely from all ministry activities at Trinity Bible Church of Dallas. Several days ago, the elders at Trinity Bible Church of Dallas were informed by Steve Lawson of an inappropriate relationship that he has had with a woman. The elders have met with Steve and will continue to come alongside him and pray for him with the ultimate goal of his personal repentance. Steve will no longer be compensated by the Trinity Bible Church of Dallas." And I really like this second paragraph, and so I'll just quickly read that for us. In light of this, may we be reminded that we are all sinners and that Jesus Christ came into the world to save sinners, and Christ remains head of his church, which is bigger than any fallen man. In fact, Jesus Christ will continue to lead his church, including Trinity Bible Church here in Dallas, just like he has from the start of this work on January 5th of 2018. Since that time, the elders have focused on the primacy of biblical exposition knit together by various men filling the pulpit each week. The Lord was building Trinity Bible Church of Dallas well before Steve became our lead preacher, and he will continue to build this church long after Steve Lawson or any other man for that matter. We would ask for your prayers for the elders, for our body, and for Steve and his family. Let us always be mindful of the words of 1 Corinthians 10:12. Therefore, let him who thinks he stands take heed that he does not fall. So this was shocking news, I think, for a lot of us. And again, he has been influential for a lot of us in the way that he's preached, and the content of his preaching and his writings and teachings. I mean, for me, I don't know what to say. This was really sad for me, and I just kind of wanted to ask, when something like this happens to a great Christian leader, how are we supposed to think about it? I think, on the one hand, we don't worship man, right? We don't idolize a man because, like the blurb, we are all fallen, right? And so we don't worship the man, and we're not so disappointed because it feels as if almost Jesus sinned. It's not like that at all, obviously, because this is also a fallen man, as we all are. At the same time, I think there is a certain level of reverence and respect that we pay to great leaders of the faith. Paul says, imitate me as I imitate Christ. And so, even though he may not be our personal pastor, people imitate him as he imitates Christ because he is a spiritual leader, an evangelical leader that preaches and teaches not only, locally in his congregation, but nationally and internationally. And so how are we supposed to think about this? Because there's one end of the spectrum where it's like, wow, I'm really sad and disappointed. Another end where it's like, well, he's a man just like all of us. Are we disappointed? Because I think there could be two extremes, right? And so how do we think through this? What are we supposed to do when something like this happens? Because this is crazy.
I think we're rightfully grieved. Yeah. I mean, I talked with my wife a long time last night, and this is one of the things that I shared with her. I think it's all part of, it's indicative of what's going on in our society now. I think we're all rightfully, it's good that we are grieving. And I think that's this is a person, even to me personally, whose sermons and his teachings have impacted me in such a way where it has drawn me closer to Christ, blessed me, and even in my sermons have influenced me positively. So it's a very sad thing to hear.
Yeah. Yeah.
But secondly, I think if I just stay in that grief, I don't think it's right. So if I truly did appreciate what he did bring, it moves me out of my own personal grief, and it moves me to praying for this man. He did a lot for me, so let me do what I can for him. And so I would like to pray for him. I pray for his wife, his children, his grandchildren that are going to be affected.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is going to be forever. The man is 73. And so he's not a young man. And so I think praying for him and his family, especially Mrs. Lawson, would be the very next step that I would think about doing. And last night, that's what I was thinking, because we found out this news last night or yesterday afternoon.
Yeah.
And so that's what I will be doing. And I think just doing those 2 steps will be healthy for any of us, especially those that really, really were blessed by Stephen Lawson's teachings and his preachings and his sermons. And so if that was the case, then, glorify God, thank him for the messages and the expositions that you got from him, but also pray for the man now in the state that he is in now. And so that's what I would do.
You posted something yesterday, Pastor Eugene. I want to just read that for us. And I thought that was helpful to think about. So I'm pulling on my phone now, and this is from Vodi Bakum. He says, the wisest man in the Bible fell into sexual sin. The strongest man in the Bible fell to sexual sin. And the godliest man in the Bible fell to sexual sin. For me to think I'm above falling into the sin is to think that I'm wiser than Solomon, stronger than Samson, and godlier than King David. I'm not excusing this behavior, but I think we need to talk about the fact that as fallen people, we are all it's possible, right, to fall into this type of sin. And so I think it's just, it sheds light to the fact that as a church, we need to be praying for our leaders. We need to be praying for our members that they would not fall into this type of sin. Even more so. I mean, if great leaders can fall, anyone could fall. And so I think it's just imperative that we continue to pray for our elders, for our deacons, and for our members as well, that we would not fall into this type of sin.
Yeah. This is people. So some people ask me why this is such a big deal.
Yeah.
Why is adultery such a big deal? And remember when you asked if anybody could come back, and I said no.
Yeah.
Barring for some very rare exceptions.
Yeah.
Let's go back to that, and then I'll tell you why I want you to read this. Why I wanted you to read it. Proverbs chapter 6, verse 32 and 33.
Proverbs chapter 6, verse 32 to 33 reads, he who commits adultery lacks sense. He who does it destroys himself. He will get wounds and dishonor, and his disgrace will not be wiped away.
This is the Bible saying it. His disgrace will not be wiped away. But what we can pray for is that he become restored to Christ. And I think I can't, I'm not a mind reader. But I think because what it said there in the statement by the elders, it's Stephen Lawson who himself, confessed.
Yeah.
That was the first step that he wanted to take, to be restored, meaning to be repented, not to be restored to the leadership. I don't think that's a possibility. He's never going to be a preacher again.
And that's crazy to think about because he's so gifted. He's so good at preaching. And it's just such a sad thing.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily see it that way, to be honest, because of what we just read in Proverbs. The disgrace won't be wiped away. It should be the fear of God that should enrapture the person when thinking about this. To be restored back to Christ means heaven will see him again, and we'll rejoice that Christ is so awesome that he could cover even this sin to this capacity. And that's what I would hope and pray. So this is the prayer that we're praying for Stephen Lawson, is that he be repentant and continue on the path of repentance until he dies, and that, you know, he be restored to the community or the communion of the church. And I hope that happens. You know, this is a grievous sin. We talked about porneia, but it's especially true when it comes to the standards that we hold a minister in. When you're a minister, you're held to a higher standard, and you cannot give in to this. You have to put it as far away from you as possible, because in the blink of an eye, this can happen. In the blink of an eye, this can happen. It just shows you how terrible and truly how fearsome sin is if we don't regard it with the proper lens. I know people do. May this be a lesson to people out there who are tinkering with sin, who are looking at pornography, who are sleeping around, whatever it is. May this serve as a lesson. And more than the fear of sin or the fearsomeness of sin, may the fear of God be instilled within your life. You can destroy your life in the blink of an eye.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Pastor Eugene. And now we'll move on to our our discussion with our elder Hoyoung. Thank you for that, Pastor Eugene. You probably said something.
No.
As promised, we do keep our promises, unless it comes to our merch, that we don't keep those promises. But as promised, we have with us our very own elder Hoyoung. He's joining us, and we're going to be talking about our finance ministry and our budget. And it's very, very exciting to have you here. We're all suited up for the occasion, so thank you for joining us today.
Can we just go over what happened with Sam?
Oh no!
Yeah, so I wore a blazer today to morning prayer in anticipation of our podcast.
Yeah.
And then I saw Sam in a hoodie and shorts
Those are
with
retreat
Birks
hoodie.
on and socks. And I thought, surely he brought clothes to change into.
Yeah. And I didn't know that it was that type of activity. I just thought it was kind of like a, hey, let's chill and talk about budget. But I think it's
because our finance elder always raises the bar.
Speaking of raising the bar, so that's what happened today. And so I have a suit on as well.
You look nice, though, Sam.
Thank you.
It'd be nice if you wore something like this every podcast.
Every podcast.
Because it is for the world to see.
Yeah, every podcast.
That you are an elder to be.
That's true.
That's true.
That's
First
very true.
time announcing that.
What do you mean?
Oh, is this
That you're an elder elect.
Did we not say that before?
I don't think so, right? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yay. Right?
Should mention our other guests too.
So we also have with us, our elder Hoyoung, and then young David, as we like to call him, Mr. Schnitzel. Wait, what's your Spielberg?
Dude, do you know what a schnitzel is?
It's like a little croissant. No, it's from Germany.
No.
What is this? What's a
A
schnitzel?
schnitzel is like a German chicken cutlet.
Oh, really? I thought it was a pastry. That's what I think of when I think of that way. And so today we want to talk about our finance ministry. We want to talk about our budget. I think there are a lot of questions that people may have, and so we are really excited to have our elder here with us who oversees the finance ministry. And so he'll be with us and answering some questions. And Pastor Eugene, I know that you'll be answering some questions as well. So I guess just to start, people may not be aware. And so I just wanted to start with like the foundation, like the bottom floor. What is the goal of our finance ministry? And, kind of in talking about that, what is the mission and goal of our church, and how do our finances reflect that goal and mission?
Yeah, so I think this question can be answered in two ways. The first one is the goal of our finance ministry team, which encompasses the deacon that oversees our finances, and we have 4 members within our finance team.
Right.
And their goal is to carry out the administrative day to day, week to week, month to month transactions of tithes and offerings and just the expenses that come in and out of our church properly. So it's really making sure that we are able to administratively put in the right numbers from a tithes and offerings, from a collections every Sunday, to all the ministerial expenses that our staff, elders, and deacons kind of utilize, and make sure we allocate those expenses properly. It's more of an admin role, but I think the greater question that I think people might think about from a finance ministry is, the goal of the finance ministry is something that the staff, the elders, and the deacons all have to oversee, because they have their own budgets and they have all of their ministerial duties. And so the goal is to, in reverence and also fear of the Lord, to look and utilize our church finances in a way that is glorifying to the Lord. That's how I would play the bigger part. But from a finance team perspective, it's more of an administrative, day-to-day, week-to-week job function.
Gotcha. I think that's helpful to know. I think some people maybe are new to our church or maybe never even thought about it. So I think that's helpful for us to know. I guess in terms of the goal and the mission of our church, how does our finances reflect that mission? And the reason why I ask this is because, in previous episodes, we've talked about churches that do like a 50-50 model, let's say, right? Where 50% of the finances stays in the church, 50% goes outside of the church. And we talked about kind of our views on that. But so I guess my question is, what is the goal of our church and how do our finances support that goal?
Well, I could start off with the whole understanding of when we create a budget. And so I think first, Hoyoung, what he said was good. I would just add that just because they do admin, it's not, people might think this is like a menial job.
Right.
I wouldn't think so. You're handling, he said it, you're handling the tithes and offerings of the church. This is a holy offering that was given to them. So even if they're counting, even if they're collecting, this is a holy, even I would say even almost a priestly job, because the priest would do that.
Yeah.
So it's a wonderful thing that our finance ministry does. And, I think it's something that should be appreciated and not thought of as, I don't think admin jobs should be thought of as low in any way. Not that he implied that. He definitely didn't.
No.
But like admin jobs are amazing. What you get to do is you get to carry the offerings of the saints and count them and pray alongside them. It's a wonderful job, which leads me to the whole question that you first asked. So let me take a broader view, and then I think Hoyoung is gonna kind of cap it off. But what your eschatology is really matters when it comes to church budget.
Yeah.
So what I mean by that is, do you believe? So some people, there's language that's being used like we need to redeem our culture. So if you use language like that, you believe that your job or the church's job is to redeem a culture outside and to basically save people. That's not the way we function, because that's not our eschatology. Our eschatology isn't that earth will turn into heaven. Our eschatology is that heaven will come to earth.
Yeah.
And what does that mean then for those that are in earth? Those that are in earth, we recognize that Jesus is coming again, and the second, coming is going to be here soon. So how do we prepare? That's for us. That's the better question. So for our missions, it's going to be reflected in our missions, and it's going to be reflected in our ministries, meaning our discipling. So we cannot, in a sense, redeem the culture. You could say, I want to put budgets here for these ministries outside. That's not bad. We want mission agencies to go forward. That's not bad either. But I think whether you have budget for missionaries, like a 50% or not, I think that's not the point. The point is, how do you see the end times coming? How do you see your eschatology? What is that about? So if you think that you can transform the world, then you will have a different budget than people who understand that We don't transform the world. We don't do any of the redeeming. What we can do is those that are redeemed and are being redeemed, those that come through our doors, we can disciple them. So a lot of the ministry stuff that we have is about discipleship. It's about, making sure we have staff that disciple, is making sure that we have small groups that disciple, is making sure that we have a worship that continues to disciple those that are here. And when it comes to missions, it's still about discipleship. It's like we are going out there and making disciples. We're not going out there to redeem a culture. Although the confusing part, I think, comes in where we could go a little deeper is, don't we see communities transformed eventually when we do the discipling? I think that's yes. But we don't do it with the aim of changing the community. We do it with the aim of discipling. And as a byproduct, we see communities changed. But here's the thing. Communities might not change. Communities actually might hate Christians as the church grows. We actually see that happening in the world today as well. So you could have something like Moscow, Idaho, where you see Douglas Wilson and that community changed for the better part. But we'll also see other places where this community of Christians will grow, like in China, and then what happens? The government comes down on them harder, and they go to prison, and they get tortured. And so the aim isn't to transform culture. The aim is to disciple and to make disciples. So that's the eschatological view that I wanted to share first.
The two kingdom, man.
Are you sure you're not a Kuiper guy?
I don't even know who that is. So the reason why I even asked that question though is because I think I've heard people say, having a budget is great. Having all these different line items and whatnot is great. But why are we using that money for ourselves? Why are we feeding ourselves? Because shouldn't the church, like you said, be a light in the community? Whether the community changes or not is up to God's providence. But either way, shouldn't the church be a light in the community? Therefore, shouldn't our finances reflect that? And so I've actually heard this before from a young believer where they're like, all we're doing is just feeding ourselves.
Yeah, and we'll take that to the extreme. And so I won't name the person, but somebody that I'm really close with.
Oh, never mind.
Sam Yang. Goes to this church, and the church pastor actually said that. And it's like, why are we feeding ourselves? We got it. And so what ended up happening is there was no feeding of the flock. There's no ministries. It's always about helping those that are outside. And again, I said this before, but when you keep on saying stuff like that, the people on the outside are never named. It's always some kind of group outside, like the poor. It's not like Frank, you know what I mean? But the people inside your church are named. It is like Sam Yang or David Kim or Jun Suk Seo. They're named. And those are the people that we should be helping. So what eventually happens when we take this to the extreme, I got to tell you from what I see is that you become more and more of this liberation theological bend. And the gospel isn't here to save lives spiritually. The gospel is here to give food to the poor or to help those that are in the margins. And so the church never grows. They're never discipled. You look at these kinds of churches. You know what? They never have Bible study. They never have small groups. Because why would we waste money on ourselves? We got to help those that are outside. And so the flock actually atrophies and they starve. And so I think that is a very, very dangerous place to be. And I get a young member said that to you. And in their youth, we should raise them up in gentleness and care. Like a bruised reed, Jesus doesn't break. And so we should be very gentle with the young people. I mean, unless you want to add to
No, I mean, I agree. I mean, if you look at the mission of our church, right, it's basically to glorify God through making disciples. How do we make disciples? To make disciples, you want to be helping people that are of lesser in their faith maturity to become more mature, to love the Lord, right, to be more Christ-like. Well, you have to do that by teaching and learning, right? And so you accomplish that through having teachers within the church and having a system or ministry set up for us to be able to teach our members. And you're hoping through that they're equipped to go into the world to be a light, right? And so there is the opposite of that is if our foods are too extravagant, you would hope that the leadership comes and says, whoa, we should not be spending money in this way, right? Like we don't have gourmet meal spread that the church pays for every Sunday after service. There are times when we do that because we wanted, like we do the annual doulos summit, right? Where we appreciate all the servant leaders and all the servants within our church with providing a nice meal, right? We are being a little more extravagant for that one particular event because it is a place of thankfulness for all the people that have served selflessly right throughout the year. Now, if we did this every single Sunday, I would completely agree with this person. But we're not just feeding ourselves, right? Like we're just providing opportunities for there to be fellowship, for there to be deeper means of growing and maturing with one another. Right. And so I don't think that our budget represents just us eating. Right. I think that's a very narrow way of thinking. If I were to go into how budgets for us are created, like if Pastor Eugene came to the session and said, I want to do a 50-50 rule, right? I would I would be very confident thinking that the session would say we don't agree with that because our two biggest budget line items are rent and staff, right? So once you figure that part out, then you just have to double that to make your annual budget. You can't create a budget without understanding the tithes and offerings of the members of your church. Now, there is, we have been very fortunate over the past 5 to 7 years of how our church has grown and matured. And we do try to increase our budget every single year, depending on the size of our church. But we don't double our budget, right? Because then we're not going to be able to, we don't know if we're going to be able to be good stewards of the expenses of the church, as also, the stewarding the tithes and offerings that the Lord has graciously blessed us with. And so you have to use wisdom and discernment in trying to figure out what that budget would look like. But there are two major fixed costs that our church has. It is the day-to-day operations of keeping the lights on, paying the electricity bill, and paying our staff and paying rent. That's where you start your budget off of. And then you go and you try to see what our tithes and offerings have looked like, how our church has grown over the past few years, and also you look to see how you believe the Lord will continue to bless His church, and you don't decrease your budget. You hope and pray that you can continue to increase your budget year over year.
I think what you said is really helpful because I think sometimes when people think about stewarding their finances or stewarding the church's finances, they have this very extreme and I think incorrect view that the church should be poor and we should be pouring this money out to everybody around us, but that's not the case. Stewarding our money doesn't look like that. Stewarding our finances as a church, I mean, again, like you said, it's making disciples, Matthew 28, the GC. And then you have worshiping as the saints gather on Sundays. That's the main purpose of the church. And so with that purpose in mind, that's how we go about creating our budget. And I think that's something that we have to realize is just because you're a church doesn't mean, and I think people have this like over romanticized idea of like, oh, I'll be poor so that the neighbors, around me can be rich and wealthy and stuff like that. We don't even think that way for even our personal finances. And so it's interesting that people have this kind of skewed view of what a church budget should look like and how, pastors should be poor and we shouldn't have nice things and we shouldn't eat fancy meals because all that money should be going to quote unquote the poor.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. So I remember a few years back, I was talking to a brother, he doesn't come to this church anymore, but we were talking about finances, and he said, I do think that, this isn't me, this is what he said to me, he goes, I do think that pastors should get paid a little less than what their means require so that they're on their knees praying to the Lord.
Yeah.
And I couldn't disagree more. Because the job of a pastor isn't to be on his knees praying to God to increase his his personal finances or to increase finances. It's to teach and pray for his members and for those who don't know who Christ is.
Yeah.
Right? And I would rather our teaching elders, like, isn't it more prudent for us to have our teaching elders focus on teaching biblically, right? The sufficiency, the inerrancy, and infallibility of the Word of God than worrying about if he can pay for his electricity bill.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense in my mind. Now, that all goes into budgeting per se, right? And I think we'll probably get into this a little more later. But
Yeah.
one of the first things I always ask Pastor Gene, and I think Pastor Gene asked the staff is, what are your monetary needs, right? And how can the church help you guys as we enter into another year of budgeting?
Yeah.
Right. I think that's a much more fruitful conversation than me saying, oh, from a finance perspective, you are this, so I think you deserve to make this much money. That is a very unhealthy, I believe, way of stewarding. Like, who am I to say that? Right? I am no one. Like, being a finance elder actually scares the life out of me. Like, I think people think like, oh, like he gets to do this. No. There's certain things I do not touch. I do not expense anything. I do not pay anyone anything because, two things, you guys have talked about this, two things that break the church are, infidelity and finances.
Yeah.
Well, being the person that oversees finances, it's really, I live in a place of fear regularly when I think about the potential power that I could possess. And so that's kind of how I approach this stuff. So when people ask me for things, I understand that I do have this position, but I don't take that lightly. It is a lot of stress and it's a lot of burden that, I make sure I continue to place on myself because I fear the Lord way more of what the Lord would do to me should I fall into this sin of, greed.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Let me just add to that. That was a really excellent point. I just want to give two anecdotes, if that's okay. I think I talked about my dad's salary. Is it on the podcast? No, right?
We have talked about it. I think so.
So
yeah,
I'll just say it because, he's retired now. So it's like no church will be affected. But when I was a kid, I got to look at my dad's W-2, and it was $14,000. And I remember thinking, this is the worst. I resented the church. As a PK, I resented the church. I was young. And I think it's a similar mentality that your friend told you. He should be, always relying on God. What he did, though, was he took that $14,000 and he would give it back to the church because the church needed to expand the building. So there's always these building projects that the church is doing.
Yeah.
And because of that building project, eventually my dad got a church in Flushing because in the beginning he started his church in Astoria. And so they were renting in Astoria, and then eventually were able to buy a building in Flushing. And I think by the end of it, it was worth like 10 mil or more, the building. But he gave it back. So that's one anecdote. As a kid growing up, I resented the church for paying him so little. And then I remember when he retired, I asked him, I think it was before he retired, I asked him, because I wasn't a pastor yet, don't you resent the church? Don't you resent the church for doing that to you? And he said, but I'll get my reward in heaven. And actually that brought me to tears because I was like, how can a man that got paid so little, got so underappreciated, say something like that? But I think it was genuine. He was genuinely saying it in his faith. And to that, the friend that said that to you might be like, see, it proves my point. At least he worked out. But here's what it didn't do. It didn't teach the church how to take care of their teacher or their under shepherd. It didn't teach the church how to use their finances wisely. And, if I'm going to be completely frank, even now their finances are a mess. like to this day. I think taking care of those that are going to under shepherd you is a part of financial discipline. And so that's what I wanted to teach this church. This is also what the elders also have in mind. Here's my second anecdote. Pastors now are educated. Not that they were in the past, but pastors now have a ton of resources. Just a personal anecdote is I decided to take 1 year, a few hours here and there. And I said, I'm going to take just a very small sum of money in my family because we don't have that much. I'll take a small sum of money and I'm going to invest it. I told my wife, we won't do any of these things. We'll kind of tail back. We'll live a little less than what our means can dictate. So I could take that and invest it. And my return on that investment was 25 to 30%. If you know about investment, that's pretty good because I used to invest before. If you give me any amount of money and I could give you a 30% return, you would pay me millions of dollars. Like, it was pretty good. I'm not saying I could guarantee it every year. I'm saying that year I decided to do it was good. And my wife was like, well, that's great. What are we going to do with this return that we get? I was like, I'm going to reinvest it. She's like, what's the point? But then if you talk to anybody, so I know that's as a quick anecdote, but I know pastors that are very capable and that did what I did and that do what I do. And they even now currently have investments and they spend time on that. So here's the question. You say you don't want to pay your pastor something, whatever. So he needs to find other means.
Yeah.
What's that? What is that going to do for his teaching, his studying? That obviously is going to take away. Maybe he's very capable and he could do both very well. But for the most part, I would say if he spends 18 hours a week, even just 18 hours, but let's say he spends 40 hours a week on this outside investment, that's 40 hours a week that he will not spend on studying.
Yep.
I mean, so that is the investment that we're talking about. Do you spend time reading and studying? Or are you worried about putting bread on the table for your kids? Because otherwise you are disqualified. If you can't feed your kid, you are disqualified from the ministry.
Yeah.
And so, that's how I would probably respond to this brother. What you are asking for is first of all, you're asking for less ministers, and you are asking for ministers to really be destitute. And you say, oh, so they can rely on God. Brother, there are so many things, even if their finances are kept, there are still so many things that they will be destitute for. Their pastors will be on their knees praying for the members that are suffering. They'll be crying and weeping over those that are hurting. They'll already be in pain without you having to put this additional burden on them. And this is what Paul actually extended. It's like, when I was poor, you gave me something to eat. And he was praying for the church in Thessalonica and praying for those churches there. And it is sharing such deep gratitude that they helped him in his time of need. And so those are the two anecdotes I would add. I'm glad, Hoyoung said that because I would completely echo that. I think pastors are very capable. These are, I know pastors that were former lawyers that are pastors, people that were in finance that are now, pastors, people that have other jobs that were educated and they're doing this. Are you saying that we're going to deprive you of you feeding your family just so that, you could say, I can get on my knees more?
Right.
That seems honestly to be, I'm going to go a little step further because I grew up in that environment. That is probably one of the more pretentious things that you could say, that you could dictate the pastor's spiritual life by manipulating these resources that should be rightfully his.
Like, I'll give you something to pray for.
Yeah.
That type of thing.
Yeah, that really kind of scares me.
Yeah.
I think that's not the role of a ruling elder.
Yeah.
When we come up with salary, I think we're going to get into this in a little bit, but we talk about salaries and budgets and standpoint. People have to understand, there are hours and sleepless nights that people pour into thinking about this stuff and research that is going on, and also talking to each individual staff member about what your needs are.
Yeah.
Who am I and who is anyone else to say, No, I don't agree. Like, where does that standard come from? It's definitely not coming from the Lord. I can tell you that right now, right? And so I think the healthiness of having these conversations and, taking care of the teachers is something we need to do with a lot of discernment, and not something that we just rush to kind of come to a place of, right, without having, a lot of discussions and prayer and thoughtfulness across the board.
Yeah. I think it's helpful to know like the foundation of what we're thinking about and thinking through as we are budgeting. And so I wanted to go into kind of, like you said, the practicality of our budget, like how we do things, why we do things. And so the question is, how does our church come up with the budget, right? Like how does that even happen? Who decides how much goes into what ministry? Who has the final say? And does the size of the ministry and the need always dictate the amount that is allocated to that ministry?
Yeah, so I'll just kind of get more practical with kind of what we do on an annual basis.
Right.
So deacons, each elder oversees a number of deacons, and the deacons oversee the ministries that they lead. So last month, we advised the deacons to come up with a budget because we were heading into budget season.
Yeah.
Typically, what we ask of the deacons is what are your ministerial events and things that you need are you plan to do for next year? What have you done this year? And kind of are there monetary ties alongside those events or those activities?
Yeah.
If they are, please present them. And as your elder who oversees your ministry will present it to the session. And then the session will discuss and say, okay, this ministry really need this much money. How much money have they spent in the past? How big is this ministry? How big is this event? And is this a number that we think makes sense? So the elder overseeing that ministry will present to the session, and then the session discusses it as together, and then we come up with what we believe is the right number. Now, I always joke with the deacons saying, you might get your budgets cut. That's not because I am doing anything. It's because I look at all of our tithes and offerings and all of our expenses, and I see where the money is actually paid out. Whether we slash your budget by 50% or we increase your budget by 100%, right? If your ministry is thriving and there's a need, we will always come up with a way to be able to support that. However, it is a good baseline to keep deacons accountable for the things that they have said they want to accomplish throughout the year. That's where the budget really is a good place for us to think about. You're the fellowship deacon, and you are in charge of helping with the distribution of food on Sundays. Well, if our church is growing and the fellowship budget, they are spending more money in buying cups, plates, napkins, forks, and knives, that is a beautiful thing for us as a church, right? If you are a deacon overseeing college ministry, well, a few years ago when I was the college deacon, we had 40, 50 students, and we would travel all over the country. The budget request for that was naturally more because we are going all over the place and we had a lot more students. Now we have less than, we have about 5 college students. The budget for the college ministry today can't be the same it was 7, 8, 9 years ago, right? And so I think when people look at the budget, it's prudent for us and for me as a finance elder to make sure people just aren't throwing numbers out there, that you have prayed about, you have thought about it, and you're presenting something, right? Now, if you believe that this is a ministerial need that you need, well, then that is up to your elder to discern that and to properly raise that in our budget meetings, right? And for the most part, you will get that. Last year, we had our summer school that we were preparing to do a 6-week summer school program. And we looked at the budget and said, what do you guys need? Come to us with the number, right? And then we're able to support that, right? And I believe that summer school budget was very different than the VBS budget 3 years ago, right? And so I think where our church ministries are growing, we want to support in those areas. Now, if you have always had $1,000 in your budget for the past 5 years, but you spent $200 over the past 5 years. If I'm the elder of your ministry, I would ask, why do you keep asking for $1,000 and why aren't you doing anything?
Yeah.
Right. That's a tough accountability question that we would have. Right. But I would look at that as a finance elder and say, we're not giving you $1,000 anymore. We're giving you $200.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's kind of how we kind of look at this thing. But like I said, from a budget perspective, so that's how the operational aspects of that works, right? The deacons come up with a budget, they submit to the elder brings it to the session, we start praying about, thinking about it, and then we go back to the deacon and say, this is what we're going to do. I add the two big ones together, that would be rent and then staff. So that would be salaries, taxes, health benefits, whatever it is that we have. But that number changes because I need to talk to Pastor Eugene to figure out what the staff needs are, right? And so there's a fixed cost once we establish all of that. Plus, we already know what our rent in our church building is. And then when I start adding all the other deacon numbers, our deacon budgetary requests, then we get to a number for the year, right? And then from there, we're always trying to be a church who stewards well, and we want to save money as also.
Yeah.
We have missionaries that we support. And so when you put in all of these different budget needs, it kind of we add it all up and we get to a number. So then the question there is, are our tithes and offerings that we are getting this year, last year before, are we on potentially projecting to be able to hit this budgetary need, right, that we have for the following year? And that's just through prayer and just having conversations with church. And then say the session says, we believe that this is the number. I'll present it to our leaders, our members meeting at the end of the year. And then, we encourage our church. We always thank our church for being cheerful givers, because I believe our church members are. And I think we know that it's not us who's made this money, but it's God's faithfulness in our lives that has done this. And that's played out in how our tithes and offerings have grown over the years. And so when we present a budget, it over the past 3 or 4 years, I think it's gone up like 6, 10, 15%. But so have our tithes and offerings. So it's been a true blessing to be able to be able to see this unfold. And so that's kind of the thought process of how we put all of this together.
So I think a question that someone might have is, you brought up the different line items, the different ministries, and the deacons and the elders prepare it, the budget in prayer and really thinking a lot about it. What if someone were to think like, for example, I'll use youth group as an example because I'm in charge of youth group. We have 3 children right now. We have 3 students. And so what if someone were to look at the budget and be like, 3 students, that's nothing. Why are we giving them X amount? Like, is it worth it? And the reason why I ask this question is because I think sometimes when we look at it from a corporate standpoint, you want to cut costs that are not allowing you to grow in the direction that you want to go, right? And so you always have to analyze the cost and the benefit. And so, for example, with 3 youth kids, it's like, okay, we have 3 youth kids. The teachers can pay for their meals. Like, why do we need to allocate $500? Like, why do we need that? And someone could be thinking this. And so I guess to someone that may be thinking that, how would you address that heart?
So I would say that in 2 ways.
Yeah.
The first one is I would say go talk to Sam. I'm just kidding.
You already did. That's why he's bringing it up.
No one brought this up.
I'm just kidding.
Just saying.
I would not say talk to Sam because he wouldn't even know how he got to the budget number.
No, I wouldn't.
I would. No, the first thing I would say is our church is not a profit center.
Right.
We're not here to raise money. And to give it back to our members. Right. We're in the business of, and if you want to call it business, we're in the business of eternity and helping people serve Christ, follow Christ faithfully, and to be a light in this world. That's the name of the game that we're playing, right? If you want to call it a game or a corporation, whatever it is.
Right.
So my first response is we're not a company.
Yeah.
Right? So anything that we have left over, it's not like we're giving back to our members, right? There's no distribution in finances. There's no dividends that are paid here, right? There is trust that God's faithfulness to our church, whatever is left, that we would steward it well. And that is the fear that I'm talking about. It's the leftover that the God has given us. How are we stewarding that? That's the stuff that keeps me up at night sometimes, right? And that's stuff I try to keep off of Pastor Eugene's plate, right? But there are times we have to talk about this, right? And I think we'll talk about like building and stuff later on. But that's how I would respond. Number one. Number two, I would say, I would just lay out like, here is why this money was allocated.
Yeah.
We were given the events and the list that they wanted to accomplish, and this is what they did. Quite frankly, I think it could be more, is probably what I would say to this member, right?
Yeah.
But I think the first and foremost, someone had a heart of like, what are we doing with all of this? I would just say we're not, this isn't a company here.
Yeah, and the reason why I ask this is because I think oftentimes, hopefully not oftentimes, but sometimes people might think of their tithes and offering as an investment, let's say, in the sense that they are investing this money into the church. Let's see what they do with it and how I can benefit from that, right? But like you said, our job as a church our focus is eternity. And it's just, and that's why I wanted to start with what's our purpose is to make disciples and to worship God. And so that's why I wanted to bring that up as well, because I think if we strictly think about it from a cost benefit standpoint, like, yeah, why would we have $500 allocated to 3 kids versus like, why do we have less allocated for a bigger group? People start calculating in their minds and thinking this doesn't make sense, but they don't understand, I think at times, the context, the age group, the need, the spiritual need, all the different aspects that go into the prayerful thinking of the budget. And I think, and that's important to talk about, I think. So that's helpful for us to know. Speaking of, I guess, we talked about salaries before. And we don't have to go into too much detail, but how do salaries work? And so because it almost feels like, are we just picking a number? Or you did say that, we talk to the staff and we talk about their needs, but how does that work? Is that a weird question?
We already talked about it. Yeah.
No, so if I could elaborate on this. So what people don't realize is like, when we talk about salaries, I probably don't sleep well for about a month and a half because how our staff is compensated one way or another, it affects your ability to live and pay for things. We live in Bergen County, New Jersey. It is very expensive to live here. I look at medium salaries in this county, in this state. I look at, how much more expensive it's been for even myself going to the grocery store, paying so much more money for this and that. And, we want to be able to, like I said before, take care of our staff where you can focus on ministry instead of whether or not you can buy your daughter milk.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and I know that for some people it can be like, what do you mean? Like, we're all struggling on how to figure out how we can pay for our daughter's milk. I agree. However, that doesn't mean like we shouldn't do our best to, work with our staff to do our best to fulfill, what your needs are.
Yeah.
But, and it's a topic, it's kind of funny. Like up until last year, I would be the one that's like stressed out all the time and I'll come up with numbers. And then like our staff would just, the rest of the session would be like, okay. And I'm like, what? No one has anything to say here? But last year we actually had a pretty robust conversation about kind of this. Not that people disagreed, but it was more like being more intentional with how we want to, how we pay our staff members, irregardless of like who they are, but really based upon job titles and whatnot.
Yeah.
But even that, like, we had to also take a step back and say, you start paying people on job titles, then we're just like in every other corporation. So it's having a lot of discernment of figuring out, like, how are job titles important, but also we're a church.
Just for the record, what Hoyoung did was he looked at not just average, like, cost of living here, but like what denominations paid, what their compensations paid, like different across denominations, across the states, and also locally, specifically, what some of the minimums were, what the average was for even like the lead pastor or the senior pastor.
Yeah.
And if I may say, this church is very generous to the staff, and I think this is so that we can honor God. And I really do appreciate what the session does for me and the other staffers in our church.
And to be honest, that's why I brought up this question again, is because I don't think people understand the prayers and the thoughts and the consideration that goes into, having a salary for an individual. And I think there's a lot of prayer that goes into it. And so I wanted to bring that out because I think this is a topic that people might not really feel comfortable asking you, Hoyoung, or even asking the staff members like, hey, why do you get paid the amount that you get paid? I never, people don't really ask that type of question. And so I wanted to just bring that out here because I think people may not see the work that you put in, right, to provide for the staff, from our church. And so I just wanted to talk about that because I think that is an amazing thing that our church does.
Yeah, and you throw a lot of variables into that too. Like we're a 130, 140 member church, and we have 6 staff members. I think that's kind of unheard of in this area. But our church has been very faithful in their cheerfully giving, and also we're in a place where, we every staff member brings such value to our church, right? And then you throw in the variable of ordination.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And we have the men who desire to be ordained and to be a teaching elder, but we also have a director of women's ministry. So these are things that I think about is like, is that job less than, or is that job equal to? If that job is equal to, do we pay the same amount? But we have certain things established here, right? But to me, I'm thinking about, well, the director of women's ministry does so much for our church.
Yeah.
Right? And she's by herself. Mm-hmm. And so how do we think about compensation fairly, right? And so when people kind of look at, the budget at the end of the year, a lot of the things that people ask, it's a very reactionary thing because they're seeing it for the first time.
Yeah,
and they're like, it's a lot more emotional. Mm-hmm. And so when I respond, I try to understand that they're coming from a place of they haven't really thought about this. But also in the back of my mind, I'm like, man, you guys have no idea how many hours we have talked about this thing and prayed over it, right? So it's a two-way understanding of people's expectations, but also hoping and praying that our congregation trusts us enough that we have done all the things that you've thought about. Like when people ask, I love the question they ask you, it'd be great if you or the session thought about, right? And we always graciously say yes. We really appreciate what you said, but sometimes I'm like, we have thought about this and talked about this for hours, right? But we can't just come out and say that because these are the concerns of our members, and quite frankly, what they're saying makes a lot of sense, right? So it's not like we're not taking what you're asking seriously. It's also in my mind is I hope you trust that we have really thought about the things that you have asked, because we always say what are people going to ask? Mm-hmm. What are people's responses and reactions going to be? Yeah. And are they valid? Right. And so that's where we're hoping that people can trust the discernment and wisdom that the session members have here.
I think the reason why sometimes finances could be such a sensitive topic and maybe even an uncomfortable topic for people to talk about, especially church finances, is because, like you said, there have been so many instances where this has been a temptation and trap for many people, many ministers and leaders. And so I guess my question is, and this isn't just to ease our comfort or anything because we don't trust our church, nothing like that, but people might be curious, what are the checks of accountability that we have? What do we do in regards to our budget, how it's spent, the money that comes in and goes out? What are the levels of accountability that we have within our finance ministry, within our church, within our leadership in regards to our finances?
So over the past few years, some practical things that we've done is we put together an accounting manual. We've engaged outside accounting firms to take a look at our procedural day-to-day, week-to-week activities that we do to make sure there are checks and balances of what expenses can be put in, what expenses are paid out, what needs more than one level of sign-off to be able to pay, right? Sam, you can't just submit in every single expense without there being some kind of question of, oh, okay, we do this. We also look at where people are spending their budgets on a month to month, but more like the quarter to quarter basis.
Yeah.
And then, I believe that the finance team has or will be sending out each deacon and staff member what their hospitality and what their budget spends have been.
Right.
So that's ways for us to take a look at it. I look at our budget every single day, just about. I look at our bank statement every day. Not just because I want to see it, but more to make sure there isn't anything like off that's going on. People hack and people spend credit cards all the time.
Yeah.
And so that's why I just look at it. But we have engaged third parties like professional service firms to help us actually create some workflow to make sure that we are held accountable, as well as myself and our finance deacon Josh Lee.
Yeah.
We
Great
talk
guy.
pretty frequently to make sure that we're on plan. And even like hospitality budgets that we give each our staff. Like if the need is I've had to do a lot more, that I need more money, then that's fine. But we want to make sure that our staff are also staying within the budget that they have been allocated, right? And so there's different ways that we try to keep each other accountable, and those are all processes that I take a look at and we take a look at as a finance team, and to see where we can improve regularly.
Well, not to fail to mention our end of the year budget report that we do. So in the end, the whole church gets to see what every dollar and penny has been spent on.
Yeah.
So all of our members get to see that breakdown at the end of the year.
Yep.
And so we do have that level of accountability in our church.
And I try to do my best to over-explain things.
Yeah.
Just because I don't want people to ever leave those meetings with like a ton of questions of a ton of uncertainties. But yes, the church definitely does keep us accountable. And we have great, like, gracious members, because whenever we bring up like the new salaries of our staff, like everyone claps. Right? Like most churches, I feel like people get mad. They're like, why does he make that much money? But here people like applaud.
Like, finally Sam gets to make a few more bucks.
And so I really appreciate that, because one of my biggest nervousness of presenting the budget is why does Pastor Gene get paid this much money? Mm-hmm. Why does Pastor Paul get paid this much money? And it's like, those are really could be contentious conversations, right? But we've been very fortunate that our members have been so joyful and cheerful even in that. Yeah.
And I think, kind of to add on to your point, I think our members have been very, very helpful and prayerful. And you could tell the way, like you said, how they respond in those budget meetings, the questions that they come with. And it kind of shows you the heart of our church and how we view our elders and how we view our leaders and how we continue to pray for our church. And so I guess on that note, we know that budget season is upon us. And we know that the elders will be, praying for our budget and the deacons will be preparing as well. How can we best support our elders and deacons throughout the season? How can we best pray for our elders and deacons throughout the season? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's just that we would be good stewards
Yeah.
of the finances and just the blessings that the Lord has given us, right? We should always look at church finances with a fear and reverence, I think. Those are the two things. Like, we should be in reverence that we have the opportunity to glorify God, but fear that we better steward this thing well, or else, you should really fear the wrath that may come upon you. And so that, especially when you talk about finances and people's money.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Any other comments, Pastor Eugene?
Yeah. If I can say one last comment, Hoyoung has been faithfully serving in the finance ministry for 2 years now. 3?
I think it's 3 or 4.
3. At least 3. And he is finally on sabbatical in 2025.
Yeah.
So just want to say thank you, brother. You've done such an amazing job. When you lose sleep, I was able to sleep. But we were able to share the burdens together as a session member. And just for the record, I think our church really does appreciate you, and I appreciate you. So thank you so much for what you do in our church.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's also his birthday today, by the way.
Yeah, it is.
Yep.
Happy birthday,
it's
brother.
September 23rd.
Oh, that's
it's,
right.
It's his big 4-0, is it?
No, 3-9. 3-9.
Wow, 3-9.
Close.
Yeah.
I kind of, I think I forget that it is my birthday. I've been so busy.
It's today. It's today. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday to me.
Happy birthday.
Thank you for that. And we thank you for listening to this episode of the Dear Church podcast. Join us next week for,
Are we going to talk about Rahab?
for Rahab. No, it's really exciting because it's like, dang, can I lie or can I not lie? You know what I mean? And we gave a little sneak. I don't know if we're going to keep the preview in there, but we're going to be talking about lying in a sense. Can we lie? What does it mean to lie? Am I lying right now?
Yes.
You'll never know. We hope and pray that this has been a blessing in your ears. Fight the good fight, finish the race, keep the faith. Peace.
Peace.